I was halfway through a chipped mug of black coffee at the corner table of Linden and Company, the kind of cafe where the sunlight seemed to move slower than anywhere else. The page of the book I was trying to read blurred as I watched her across the room. My friend's mom, Eleanor, 42, maybe 43, though she'd never confirm, sat with a notebook and a pen, fingers pausing over the page like she was deciding whether to trust the words she was about to write. She noticed me looking and tilted her head slightly, not a full smile, just enough to make the corner of her lips curl. Something private passed between us in that gesture, like she was letting me in on a secret I didn't yet know. I cleared my throat, trying to pretend I was absorbed in my own book, but I couldn't stop my eyes from flicking to her hands. The way she folded her napkin into a tiny, precise square, slow, careful, almost ritualistic. It made my chest tighten for reasons I couldn't name. "You ordered the usual, didn't you?" she asked, finally breaking the quiet. Her voice was softer than I expected, not teasing, not motherly, just precise. "I think so," I said, unsure if she meant it as a question or a statement. My voice cracked slightly, though I tried to hide it behind a cough. She nodded, as though confirming something only she knew. Then she laughed quietly, one of those small, half-hidden laughs that makes you feel like the room shrinks around you. I wanted to hear it again, but didn't know how to ask without sounding ridiculous. The cafe had its usual hum, the hiss of the espresso machine, the soft scrape of chairs, someone's phone buzzing far across the room. But around her, everything else felt filtered, slower, almost sacred. I watched her pause mid-sentence, pen hovering above the page, eyes flicking to her coffee cup as if she was counting minutes she didn't have. And when she finally scribbled something down, I realized she'd been scribbling her own thoughts, maybe secrets she hadn't yet decided to share. I fumbled with my phone in my pocket, thumb hovering over the screen. Half a dozen messages unsent, waiting for the courage I didn't have. Half a dozen things I wanted to say that sounded so much louder in my head than they ever would if I spoke them out loud. She didn't look at me, not really, but somehow, in that quiet, I felt exposed. She looked up suddenly, eyes meeting mine for just a moment too long. "You remember the last book I recommended?" she asked, almost casually. I nodded. "Yeah, I read it." "Good," she said, folding her napkin again, the fold imperfect this time, and tapping the table with her finger. "I wanted to ask you something private." Her words made my stomach twist. Private. Trusted me. I felt my throat go dry and my hands grow warm, like static was crawling under my skin. She wasn't smiling now, but there was a softness there, a kind of vulnerability I wasn't sure I was prepared to handle. I swallowed and said, "You can tell me." She hesitated. Her pen hovered over the notebook like it held the weight of the world. And then, without warning, her phone buzzed against the table. She glanced at it, eyes briefly clouding. I wanted to ask if she was okay. I wanted to reach for her hand, but I only managed a small, awkward nod. "Later," she said, almost to herself, tucking the notebook under her arm. "I'll tell you later." I watched her leave, the bell above the door chiming behind her. And then my own phone buzzed in my pocket. A single message from her. "Can we meet tomorrow? There's something I need to show you." I didn't know what it meant. I didn't know if I wanted to know, but I already knew I'd be there. I arrived at Eleanor's apartment the next afternoon. The hallway smelled faintly of lemon cleaner, faintly of something older, worn wood, books stacked in corners. She greeted me with a nod, subtle, no hug, no unnecessary gestures, but the small smile tugging at her lips made my stomach knot anyway. "Thanks for coming," she said, her voice almost too casual, like she wanted to sound ordinary. But her eyes betrayed a hesitation I couldn't ignore. We settled at her small kitchen table. A kettle whistled in the background. She poured tea for both of us, the steam curling between us like something alive. I watched her hands again. Strong, careful, not flashy, but the way she held the teacup, fingers barely touching, told me more than words ever could. I was thinking about the summer before I had your friend," she said quietly, looking down at her cup. "I had this tiny garden in the backyard. Tomatoes mostly. I'd spend mornings out there, just staring at the sun moving through the leaves." I nodded. Didn't know what to say. It was personal, but not dramatic. Just fragile. Something about it made the room feel smaller, closer. I wanted to ask more, wanted to reach across the table, but I stayed put. You never asked what it's like, being alone for a long time, she added, almost to herself, eyes flicking to mine, then away. It's quiet, too quiet sometimes. I imagined her in that garden, hair tied back, hands in soil, laughing at something only she could see. The thought made me ache, a quiet pull in my chest that I didn't want to analyze. I thought about her being divorced, the age gap, my own position as her son's friend. None of it mattered until it did, until it hovered in the space between us, a silent warning. I stirred my tea, pretending to be absorbed in the swirl. I imagined her reaching for my hand, even though I knew she wouldn't, even though I knew it would be wrong. My fingers itched to move, to test boundaries, but I stayed rigid, careful. After a long pause, I helped her with the stack of mail that had fallen by the door. Our hands brushed, not much, just fingertips, but it lingered. She looked up at me, eyebrows slightly raised, like she was amused by something only she knew. A small, shared joke without words. And for a moment, we just sat there. Tea cooling, afternoon sunlight soft on the table, silence stretching without pressure. She gave me a soft gaze, one that held nothing and everything at once. I don't know why that moment stayed with me. I thought later, walking home. Maybe because it felt like someone finally saw me. A few evenings later, I found myself back at her apartment. The hallway light was dim, warm against the cool night air outside. She opened the door, glanced at me, and stepped aside. "Come in," she said, but her voice had that slight tremor, the kind that makes you second-guess whether everything is normal. We moved to the living room. I noticed the way she lingered near the couch, folding and refolding the throw blanket like it grounded her. I set my bag down, fingers brushing the fabric, heart racing for reasons I refused to name. "I didn't expect you to come so soon," she murmured, hands tucked behind her. I just thought." My voice faltered, trailing off. Words felt heavy, dangerous. She shook her head lightly, almost imperceptibly. Don't think too much." And then she sat, careful, deliberate, leaving a space between us that felt both protective and unbearable. The room smelled faintly of tea and something else, lavender, maybe, or just her. I tried to focus on the book she had left open on the coffee table. Half the words blurred because I was too aware of her presence. I reached for the kettle, poured myself some tea, then realized she was watching me. Not closely, not in a way that was obvious, but enough. Enough that I felt exposed. "You're quiet tonight," I said, hoping to anchor the space between us. "I'm thinking," she replied. Short, clipped, eyes downcast, fingers tapping on the mug. A memory flickered, her laughing at the café, the way she tucked her napkin under the plate. I wanted to say it, wanted to tell her that I remembered, that I cared. But I didn't. My throat tightened. There was a sudden knock at the door. My friend's voice, muffled. "Hey, you home?" She flinched, shoulders tensing. I froze, heart hammering. She moved swiftly, smoothing the blanket over her lap, glancing at me as if apologizing without saying a word. Yeah? Just reading," she called. The voice sounded too casual, strained. I could see her biting the inside of her cheek. The moment passed. Door closed. Silence returned. We both exhaled, though not aloud. I sat closer, but still, a careful distance. Her hand rested on the arm of the couch. Mine twitched near it, stopping just short. My thumb brushed hers, fleeting, almost accidental, and she didn't move away, didn't pull back, just stayed there, hand half tense, like she was negotiating some invisible line. I started, voice low, hesitant. "I wanted to tell you something." She looked at me, eyes wide but calm, expression unreadable. "Not yet," she said softly. And for a long second, it felt like everything, the gap between us, the age, the risks, shrank to nothing. I leaned a little closer, heart hammering, lips half-parted. She didn't pull away, didn't close the space either. The phone buzzed on the table, breaking the spell. She glanced at it, fingers tightening around her mug. I swallowed. The words remained unsaid. The almost kiss hovered between us, fragile, suspended. I left that night with the weight of it pressing on my chest. I didn't know what would happen next, but I knew the line had been drawn. Delicate, fragile, yet undeniable. It was late afternoon when I found her sitting on the bench outside the park near her apartment. The sky had that soft, watery light, the kind that makes everything feel suspended, like you're holding your breath without realizing it. She was alone, hands wrapped around a thermos, eyes fixed somewhere beyond the swings and the empty paths. I hesitated before sitting beside her, careful to leave space. The bench felt smaller than I remembered, crowded by tension. "You came again," she said, voice low. Not a question, not a statement. Just an acknowledgement. Yeah. I let the word hang. Try not to let my hands shake. Try not to let my stomach betray me. She glanced at me briefly, then away. "Your friend called earlier," she added softly, almost as if testing the water, asking if I was around. I nodded, feeling a tight twist in my chest. Jealousy. Ridiculous. But real. I wanted to ask why she smiled at his texts differently, why her laugh sounded softer when she spoke to someone else. I didn't. We sat in silence. The thermos between us, sunlight catching the rim. I watched her fingers trace the edge, knuckles widening. I wanted to reach out, touch them, make the anxiety vanish. I started, voice barely above the wind. "I think about everything. About you." Words stuck in my throat. My throat tightened. I swallowed, hoping she didn't notice. She looked at me, expression neutral but searching, like she was holding herself back from leaning forward or stepping away. "You shouldn't," she whispered, almost to herself. Pause. "It's complicated." I laughed softly. Awkward, because the truth was worse than anything funny. "I know," I said. "I know it's wrong." Her eyes flicked to the path, then back. "And yet," she said, letting the words trail, "you're still here." The weight of it pressed down. The quietness made every sound louder. A dog barking, distant footsteps, the flap of a newspaper someone dropped. I imagined reaching for her hand, holding it, just for a second. But I didn't. Instead, I let my fingers hover near mine, tightening the invisible line between us. I don't know what I want," I confessed, voice breaking slightly, though I tried to hide it. "And I know I shouldn't want it, but—" She shook her head slightly, lips pressed together. "I feel it too," she admitted quietly, almost regretfully. A pause, a tilt of her chin. Her hand twitched, brushing against the thermos as if testing its solidity. I wanted to tell her everything. The nights I replayed her laugh, the afternoons I imagined just sitting this close, the hours I thought of her and wondered if she felt the same ache. But the words lodged in my chest. We sat like that, exposed, fragile, the space between us humming with tension. Neither of us moved. Neither spoke. And then she asked, softly, almost inaudibly, "Do you ever think about what it would be like if we just—" The sentence broke. The world narrowed to a question neither of us finished. A week passed without a word. I tried to call, text, even just show up at the park bench we'd claimed, but she wasn't there. Her apartment door stayed closed. I imagined her inside, notebook open, pen poised, maybe wondering if I'd given up or if I was waiting too. When I finally saw her, it was across the street from the cafe. She didn't notice me at first. Hair tied back, sunglasses low, walking with a slight slump I hadn't seen before. She smiled at someone, a man who waved, and something twisted in my chest. My mind spun with possibilities. Friend? Ex? Cousin? Someone from her past I couldn't touch. I wanted to cross the street, call her name, but my feet stayed planted. I realized then she had changed the rhythm of her days, of the quiet moments we shared. Maybe she had decided she shouldn't feel what she felt. Or maybe she had no choice. Her hand brushed against the man's arm lightly, a fleeting touch, and I felt a bitter twist of jealousy, tinged with guilt. It was ridiculous. We weren't together. Nothing was defined. But every small heartbeat of hope I'd nurtured suddenly felt fragile, vulnerable, like a glass I couldn't stop trembling. I thought about the thermos on the park bench, the nearly confessed words, the hovering, almost kiss. All of it seemed paused, frozen in time. Every scenario I imagined ended with her turning away, leaving me staring at the space she once filled. I pulled out my phone. Half-typed messages waited, unsent. Lines I couldn't bring myself to finish. "I miss you. I don't. I can't stop." They lingered, mocking me. I deleted them one by one, chest tightening with each swipe. Later, I stopped by her apartment, hoping for an explanation, a glance, anything. The door remained shut. I pressed my hand to the wood, listening to silence. Not empty silence, the kind that hums with absence, that smells of unspoken words. I stepped back, fingers brushing the handle, heart sinking with a strange, suspended weight. I didn't feel heartbroken. I felt paused, like life forgot to finish the sentence. I walked away slowly, thinking about all the small moments we'd shared, the napkin folds, the thermos, the quiet laughs, the near touch of fingers. They existed, but in a different dimension now, one where hope and confusion tangled together, neither letting go. That night, my phone buzzed. I glanced at it reflexively. Nothing from her. I typed a reply to a friend, deleted it, opened a blank note, and left it unsent. My thumb hovered over the screen, but I didn't press anything. Somewhere, she was moving on in her own rhythm, unknowingly reshaping the lines I thought we'd written together. And I waited, paused, aware that the story, if it even had one, was holding its breath, waiting for us to choose whether to finish it or let it dissolve. It was raining lightly when I saw her again, under the awning of the cafe where it had all started. Steam rose from her mug, curling around her fingers. She didn't look up at first, just sat, wrapped in her coat, silent. I hesitated at the edge of the sidewalk, letting the rain tap lightly on my shoulders, debating if I should turn away or cross the line I'd feared for weeks. I crossed, slowly. Each step felt heavy, deliberate, like walking through water. "You came," she said finally, voice low, almost surprised. No accusation, no relief, just observation. I didn't. I couldn't wait, I admitted. Words shaky, incomplete, carrying all the pauses I hadn't had courage to fill before. She shifted in her seat, fingers tightening around the mug. "I wasn't sure you'd come," she said. Pause. "Or if you should." I knelt slightly to adjust her chair, pretending it was mundane, but our hands brushed. Not a grand gesture, just skin against skin, and the electricity in that contact was more than any words could convey. I thought about it," I said softly. "About you. About this. About everything. And She shook her head slightly, almost imperceptibly, lips pressed together. "Shoo," she murmured. "Just sit. Sit with me." We sat in silence. The rain, the quiet hum of the street, the aroma of coffee, everything wrapped us in a bubble of fragile intimacy. My chest ached with unsaid things. Fear, desire, hope, guilt. I realized the cost of speaking, of letting her see the raw edges I usually hid. But I also realized the cost of silence. More pauses, more waiting, more distance. She slid her hand slightly toward mine. Not a grasp, not a demand, just a question. I let my fingers meet hers, tentatively, slowly, as if testing whether the fragile trust between us could hold the weight of everything unsaid. "I don't know where this goes," I whispered, voice low, almost a confession. "But I can't stop thinking about you." Her lips curved slightly, a small, honest smile. No words, no grand declaration, just that small, human acknowledgement that she'd heard me, that she accepted it without promise or expectation. "Okay," she said, soft, almost a sigh, but firm enough to hold its meaning. We stayed like that, fingers brushing lightly, rain falling in soft taps, the world moving around us while we remained suspended in a quiet, shared understanding. No declarations, no fireworks. Just recognition, presence, connection, the kind that lingers long after the moment passes. And for the first time in weeks, I exhaled fully. Not relief, not triumph, just presence. Weeks passed. Rain came and went. Sunlight moved across the cafe windows in slow arcs, and the bench in the park claimed its quiet hours again. We found our rhythm in small things. 8:47 a.m., her favorite black coffee, a shared newspaper folded just so, fingers brushing over the thermos lid as we passed it back and forth. I stopped over one Thursday morning, carrying 2 steaming cups. She was waiting, notebook open, pen paused. I handed her the coffee, and she gave that slight smile, the one that used to make my chest tighten in longing. Now, it felt like a promise without words. We talked about little things. Weather, books, recipes she'd tried and failed. Nothing dramatic. Nothing explosive. Just presence. She laughed quietly at my mispronunciations. I remembered her habit of folding the napkin under her cup. Always imperfect. Always deliberate. Those small details, once the sparks of tension and longing, had become markers of familiarity, comfort, and trust. One evening, the park bench waited for us again. We sat, thermos between us, watching the light fade across the empty paths. She rested her hand near mine. I let it hover there a beat longer before finally brushing hers. Not a declaration, not a promise, just acknowledgement. We were here, together, quietly. Life moved in its ordinary ways. My friend stopped asking questions, perhaps sensing boundaries, perhaps respecting unspoken agreements. The apartment door swung open easily now, no hesitation. Rain fell lightly on the city streets. Sunlight warmed the cafe counter, and somehow, we both fit into the spaces of each other's days. I realized, one afternoon, that the ache I had carried for weeks, the longing, the almost guilt, the pauses and near confessions, had softened. It didn't vanish. It was part of us now, folded into the rhythm of tea cups, black coffee, and the quiet hum of conversation that didn't have to declare itself. She looked up from her notebook, fingers tracing the edge of the page, and our eyes met. No words, just recognition. I remembered the bench, the thermos, the coffee cups, the 8:47 a.m. mornings, and something in me softened further. This was it. Not fireworks, not dramatic confessions. Just earned peace, earned trust, earned closeness. And as I walked home later, rain just stopping, the smell of wet asphalt rising, I thought, only we know this rhythm. Only we know the weight of these pauses and small gestures. No one else could see it. No one else would understand why a half smile, a brush of fingers, a quiet sip of black coffee could hold more than any loud confession ever could. But we did, and that was enough. The city moved around us, life carried on. But we had our quiet, our small, earned world. And I smiled. Not at her, not at me, not at the world, just at the fact that this story, our story, existed in the spaces between words, in the silences we finally allowed ourselves to share.